Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. There are more than 3,500 people who become victims of gun violence in North Carolina every year. Close to half die of their injuries, and those who survive deal with life-changing impacts. On Monday night at 6 on WRAL, we shared one survivor's story. Our WRAL Willie Daniely joins me to talk about his reporting. Willie, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here as always, Grace.
So, I want to start with this. How often do you find yourself covering shootings as a reporter, and what is that like?
Well, that number really fluctuates just like the seasons fluctuate. But I think it is safe to say that I cover several shootings a month. That number usually goes up during the summertime as opposed to the wintertime, but it definitely, it's safe to say several shootings a month.
Yeah. And, I would assume that's how you met Monique Wallace. How did you, or when did you learn her story?
I learned her story in the spring of this year. She was shot on Mother's Day, actually, not related to Mother's Day, but that's the day that this random act of violence just happened to take place. And I was doing my typical, searches through social media, and I saw one of her family members share her really heartbreaking story. This was a single woman who lived alone, who was just randomly shot 4 times through the front door of her apartment.
Has anyone been caught in that case?
Yes, police have arrested the man responsible for it. He lived in Monique's neighborhood. The only time she'd ever had an encounter with him is that he fixed her car one time before, and that's the only encounter that she had with him. So, she still has a lot of questions herself as, why did he choose her? She feels like it could have been anyone. Hopefully it would be no one, but, why did this happen to her?
Right. And what has her life been like since she was shot?
Her life has completely changed. Everything has been flipped upside down for her. She was a behavioral technician by trade. Now she does not have any movement in her right hand, so she can't go back to work. She's had to move back into her mother's home because she doesn't feel comfortable moving back into the apartment where, her life was almost ended. She can't do simple tasks for herself. She relies a lot on the help of her mother. And, she's not able to go back to work, but that doesn't mean that her bills stop. So, on top of her day-to-day bills, now she has tens of thousands of dollars in hospital bills and things for her medical care. And she doesn't have any income coming in. So this shooting has really upended her entire life.
And what was your impression of her when you went and interviewed her? I think you went to her home, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so what was she like?
As you can imagine, she's been through an extremely traumatizing situation. Even it was as simple as us knocking on her front door instead of sending her a text message, letting her know that we were there. She's suffering from PTSD. She told me that she relives that night every single day. So she doesn't like to sit near doors. She doesn't like people coming over unannounced. This has really just changed the way that she lives her life. And she really wants to return to that normalcy that she had before. But unfortunately, she's not sure if she's ever going to be able to achieve that.
Okay. Let's take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back. Willie, before the break, you were telling us Monique Wallace's story and how her life has changed since she was shot. Is her story similar to other gun violence victims in terms of the impact that it's had on their lives?
It definitely is. Unfortunately, we often hear stories about gun violence and we hear about the people who die, but after the story gets lost in the news cycle, you kind of forget about the people who are left dealing with the repercussions of gun violence. As in Monique's case, there is a mental component, there's a financial component, and there's also a psychological component. And those victims of gun violence, they're often left to deal with that by themselves. After those cases are closed, after the perpetrators are put behind bars, it's just up to them to deal with the rest on their own.
Are there any resources for survivors here in our state, and is there more that we can do?
As of now, specifically speaking of Monique's case, after the perpetrator was put behind bars, there was really nothing else that Raleigh police said that they could do for her. You know, when it comes to finances and things like that, a lot of victims of gun violence resort to fundraising like GoFundMes in order to, be able to meet ends meet and stay on top of those medical bills that are constantly flowing in. So it's really a sad situation that a lot of these people are left having to fend for themselves when, they're no longer able to work in a lot of cases.
Okay. Is there any resources, I think in your story you talk about some other states. What things are going on there in relation to gun victims?
Gotcha. So, other states are looking how to tackle gun violence, and they're looking about gun violence prevention. One state that we highlight in the story, Connecticut, it's one of 21 states around the country that have enacted what they call red flag laws, which basically prohibit people who pose a risk to themselves or others from being able to possess firearms. And they have seen a reduction in gun violence due to enacting those laws. The expert that I spoke to from Duke University said it's pretty simple. Where there are less guns, there is less gun violence. And he says it's a common misconception that people need more guns to protect themselves, that because their guns out on the street, we need to buy a gun to keep everyone safe. And he said the research shows that that's just not true.
Does Monique have a message for other people going through what she's going through?
She wants people to know that this could easily be you. This could easily be anyone in your family. She'd watch the news, she'd see stories about people getting shot and things like that, but she never expected for it to happen to herself. And she just wants people to know how one gunshot, or in her case, 4 gunshots, can change the scope of your life in just the blink of an eye. She never thought that this would happen to her. She wouldn't wish this on her worst enemy. Even the person who's responsible for doing this to her, she told me that she wouldn't want this to happen to him.
Wow.
She wants people to know that, this is something that really changes you forever. Even when she is, in better health, she'll never be back to what she once was.
Right. And we do, wish her the best in her recovery from here on out. Thank you so much for reporting on this, Willie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with triangled news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.